guys, today I want to have another discussion on Insta-Love and why I think it can be well done and well used in books. So a few months back I already did a video on Insta-Love, and I don't know why I keep coming back to this trope, but for some reason I do. And the video I did back then was about how I feel like Insta-Love has become this word that people just throw around and that sometimes doesn't really represent the thing. Like, people use it to describe Insta attraction and stuff like that. I'm gonna link it in the description and in the info cards so you can check it out if you haven't seen it yet. Today I want to focus a little bit more on Insta-Love being a trope that can be well done and something that can also be very useful if it is well done and well written. And I think Insta-Love is probably the number one most hated tropes. I'm not really sure, it's probably up there with love triangles, but I feel like Insta-Love is more hated, and I feel like a lot of people think that Insta-Love cannot be done in a good way. I feel like love triangles, a lot of people have the opinion that there are certain love triangles that are well done, like the Infernal Devices. I think that's almost everybody's favorite love triangle, and I feel like a lot of people would say that there is a way to make love triangles work, whereas I feel like Insta-Love is something that people almost immediately say is just trash. And while obviously that is definitely the case for a lot of books, I think there is still a big difference between different kinds of Insta-Love. Insta-Love is not just one thing, and it can mean different things to lots of people, even though it seems like one very defined thing. And I kind of want to do this video and talking about like 3 or 4 books as an example to kind of explain what I mean and to kind of show you that there is definitely Insta-Love that works, and in other cases how something maybe doesn't seem like Insta-Love but it still doesn't work and still somehow is Insta-Love to me. It sounds a little bit confusing right now, but just hear me out. So the book that originally inspired me to do this was actually The Sun Is Also a Star by Nicola Yoon. Now, I've read this in March and have been wanting to do a video about it since then, but I never quite found the way of how I wanted to talk about it. I never quite was able to explain what I mean, and I just couldn't really bring my point across. But recently I read The Siren by Kiera Cass, and this just steered this whole new discussion about Insta-Love in my brain again, and I thought, okay, now it's time to do this video. So let's start with the original inspiration, The Sun Is Also a Star. I'm gonna try and keep this brief so that this video doesn't go too long, but basically this is a story that takes place over the course of one day. It is a love story about 2 teenagers and how they fall in love in this one day. And this whole book is basically about that. It does show a little bit how it influences other lives, and it's both from their perspectives but also from perspectives that, you know, they just meet randomly. Like this one person they meet at the office where, you know, one of them has an appointment. Random stuff like that. So we can see their story kind of develop from different points of views and kind of can see how this also affects other people, but mostly the story is about kind of their romance. Now, if you look at it like that, it's Insta-Love. They fall in love with each other after basically a few hours. I think I love you is even said. So it's not just, oh, I think they love each other, but it's actually thoughts that they have and thoughts that they also mention to each other. So this is definitely Insta-Love. But would I not recommend reading this because of that? Absolutely not. Because this whole book, 300, I don't know how many pages, are all about this romance and how it develops. And that makes it very special. If you can kind of suspend your disbelief about this taking place in just a few hours, you will fall in love with these characters and you will really be able to understand where their feelings are coming from and how they kind of came to this point. It's just really something where the author took her time to develop this relationship, and even though in real time it wouldn't be much time, in this book it's what this whole book is about. It's 100% of the time, and so it seems very valid and it seems just very well done. And so I feel like in this case, Insta-Love is well done and it is well written. Before I get to The Siren and what I thought about the Insta-Love in that book, I want to talk about Ever the Hunted by Erin Somerville. I read this back in November or December of last year, I want to say. Back then, I didn't really think about this Insta-Love discussion in regards to, you know, if it was well written or not well written. So I can't really go into detail, but I still think this is a book that is a really good example of something where the love itself is not Insta-Love, but it feels like Insta-Love because it's not well written. And I feel like this is kind of the number one book that came to mind, but I'm pretty sure there's lots of other books that kind of apply to this, but this is just something that, you know, I still had in mind the most. And I am in general someone that is really into romantic storylines, so sometimes it can be a little bit hard for me to see where maybe the writing doesn't really work, because I will probably still fall for the romantic storyline. So whenever The Hunted, completely disregarding the whole fantasy storyline, we start with our main character Britta basically already in love with her love interest because they've known each other for a really, really long time. She also already told him that she has feelings for him. During the course of the story, they do get a little bit more involved with each other. But the thing is, even though it's obviously not Insta-Love, because Insta-Love is like falling in love with each other in just a short amount of time, it still somehow feels like Insta-Love as a reader, because you don't get to experience the feelings building up to this. And obviously there's books that are very well written, where you start with the main character already being in love with a love interest, but then you still see their relationship somehow develop, maybe the other person slowly falling for them, or, you know, you just kind of see the beginnings and they start dating and they start being in a more serious relationship, and somehow in there you still fall for them. In Ever the Hunted, that was totally lacking for me. I don't think that there was any good build-up of like romantic tension, or even like, you know, like sexual tension or physical attraction. I just don't really think it was there. Especially the love interest, kind of, you could tell that he had feelings for our main character, but still the first time he actually obviously showed them to the main character was completely out of nowhere. So obviously I wouldn't say this book has Insta-Love, so if you don't like it, don't pick it up. But I still, if you're looking for a story about like a good romance story, would 100% rather recommend you The Sun Is Also a Star, even though it has Insta-Love, instead of Ever the Hunted. Obviously, it has to do with the fact that The Sun Is Also a Star is a YA contemporary that focuses a lot on a romance, whereas Ever the Hunted is a lot about the fantasy story as well. But I still think this kind of brings my point across, in which I just feel like, once again, as in my first discussion video, Insta-Love goes a lot deeper and there's a lot more to it, and I think it's kind of shitty that a lot of the time we just reduce romance to this word. I don't know if I just want this word to die out or whatever, but I just feel like this is really something we should just differentiate a little bit more. Now let's get to the Siren, because the Siren is something where both the in real time and the on-page time was totally lacking, so that you had, or I personally had, absolutely no involvement with the romance at all. This is something that I would call Insta-Love and that I would highly not recommend if you don't want to read a story that involves Insta-Love. They fall in love in just a few hours and it takes place on just a few pages, and there is not a lot of focus on the romance, and it's really sad because the focus is a lot on friendship and family dynamics. I wish it had focused just on that. Or other way around, if it had focused, like The Sun Is Also a Star, on the romance, I think it could have been very well done. I think there was a lot of potential to make this romance work. I just don't think that the on-page time was enough to make it work. The romance is kind of cute, but I just had no way to be emotionally invested. I couldn't suspend my disbelief because even on page, I didn't have enough to kind of hold on to make me believe that these two people really fell in love. So this is basically like 100% a book where the trope Insta-Love is used and not well done. As I said, if you are like someone who really hates Insta-Love, I would absolutely say like just stay far away from this book. I feel like the Siren definitely was finally the point for me to make this video, because that really made me realize how quite often Insta-Love really lives or dies with the on-page amount that we get to see this relationship. I think that's the case for a lot of fantasy novels. Even if the characters don't know each other, a lot of time will be passing in story, several days, weeks, months, but because we don't get enough interaction on the page, you will not really feel invested in the relationship. And I sadly couldn't really find a specific example for that, but I think if you look at YA fantasy and some dystopian, you will find an example for that pretty quickly. I just think for the most of these books it has been too long for me to really remember something clearly. Ever the Hunted was kind of the only example, but as I said, it's an example where the two characters already knew each other and where one of them was already in love. But a lot of the time in YA fantasy, you obviously have the main character meeting someone new and falling in love with them. And I feel like quite a lot in that case, falling in love with that person would probably seem very valid. I mean, let's not even talk about how I feel like it's totally valid to fall in love with a person in just a few days if you spend a lot of time with them and you, I don't know, fight against something and you're kind of trying to reach the same goal. I do feel like there's lots of like hormones and stuff going on that makes you think you're in love anyway. Completely other topic that I will probably do a video on as well at some point. A lot of the time, if you would look at the story in real time, it would seem very valid. And even though sometimes it will say on the page 2 months had passed, it still won't feel real to you because you have not really felt their interactions and you have not really read about what they talked about and what they experienced together and all these different things that kind of lead up to you falling in love. I mean, go ahead and call that Insta-Love, but it's not Insta-Love because they are not instantly falling in love. It's just bad writing. Or it's just, as so many people love, an author not focusing on the romance. I get so upset when people are like, oh, I don't want the whole book to focus on romance, but then in the same breath mentioning that the romance wasn't well written. There is a certain amount of pages that kind of have to happen for someone to be invested in a romantic relationship. It's kind of annoying if we're like, oh, I don't want romantic relationship and I don't want someone to focus so much on that, and then at the same time kind of say most of the YA romantic relationships are written badly. That's just kind of contradicts each other, and I think that's kind of what I felt while reading the Siren. I feel like I either just completely wanted her to abandon the romantic storyline or invest way more time in it. If you're not into romance, you will probably still be annoyed by this book, even though it's just such a small amount. But if you're into romance, it will just not be enough to have you satisfied with the whole book and the conclusion. Okay, I'm starting to get really ranty and somehow lose my point, but I still think I was able to kind of bring across what I mean. I don't really know what my kind of conclusion would be for this whole video. I think once again, it's just that Insta-Love is kind of something that, first of all, is subjective anyway. I mean, what does Insta-Love mean? For someone it will mean falling in love after a year. For someone it will mean falling in love after a month. You don't whatever. Everybody is subjective when it comes to that anyway, and I still feel like a lot of the time teenagers feeling like they fall in love is very valid anyway, because they don't really know yet how to cope with it anyway, and they will feel like they are in love, and then 10 years on they will realize it was not love, but at that point it felt very real. So yeah, but yeah, I think my conclusion is just that Insta-Love can be well done. I don't know why I'm so passionate about Insta-Love. I think I just want people to be more specific when they talk about Insta-Love and to not just use it to kind of lure people into books or out of books, you know, to just be like, oh, this doesn't have Insta-Love, because what does it really mean? Does it mean it's something that really builds up over time in the story as well? Or is it just something that just takes a little bit more pages in the story than it would in another story? So yeah, I'm not saying you should have to do any of these things, whatever. Still call whatever you want Insta-Love, I guess. I mean, you do you. I don't know. As I said, I somehow feel very passionate about Insta-Love, and I just kind of wanted to make this discussion. As always, please let me know any of your thoughts in the comments down below. How do you feel about Insta-Love? And when you talk about Insta-Love, what do you mean? Do you mean it's just bad written? Or do you really mean, oh, it happened in the course of just a few hours or just a few days? I would just love to know your general opinion. Or if you have any books where Insta-Love was well done, like The Sun Is Also a Star, or where non-Insta-lovey romantic relationships were not well done, like in Ever the Hunted, just let me know, and then maybe I can also pin a comment that has some recommendations, or rather examples, I guess. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I guess I'll see you soon. Bye!